Do you think your garden's too small to produce very much food? Think again. Even the tiniest gardens with the right strategies can produce an abundant harvest. Today I'm going to share some of my favorite tips for growing more food in less space. These strategies will help whether you're planting in-ground, raised beds, containers. If you're in an apartment and all you have is a small balcony, you can still grow a ton of food. The first tip to maximizing your garden space and growing a lot more food in a small amount of space is using vertical space. Vertical gardening is one of the most underrated ways to maximize your growing space. And really, you don't need anything fancy. You can set up a simple trellis system like the one I have here with chicken wire and T-post, and that's going to be good for a lot of your vining variety plants. I grow cucumbers on this. I can grow tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, slicers, or even beefsteak tomatoes on this. I can grow my pole beans on this. There are a lot of trellising options when it comes to vertical gardening, and this is just one of them. But you have string trellises for your tomatoes. You have bamboo stakes, which I've talked about in other videos, which are super awesome for containers, especially your cherry tomatoes in containers. You can use an 8-foot post to trellis your tomatoes and do single stem pruning. And if you use that method, you're able to plant your tomatoes about a foot apart. If you want to 2x or even 3x your harvest, try succession planting. And what that is when you're ready to pull one crop out of a space, you have another crop already ready to go in. And by doing it this way, you can actually have 2 to 3 seasons of growing vegetables depending on where you live. A lot of places what you're going to have is like your spring into summer season and your summer into fall season. And like I said, depending on the crop, you may get 2 or 3 harvest out of that one space in your bed. So for example, when you're ready to pull lettuce out of your spring garden, you may have a pepper that's ready to go in next. And as temperatures start to cool down and things start to get a little bit cooler toward the fall, maybe you put kale in that space, and then that can grow into the first frost, or maybe even a little bit later into the season, into your early winter part of the season. And by doing it this way, like I said, you get 2 to 3 times the harvest in that one single growing space. A pro tip when it comes to succession planting is add compost in between your turnarounds. If you're turning your beds over pretty quickly, which is what we would do in succession planting, having a crop go in immediately after another one, you're not really giving that bed time to rest. So the best thing you can do is replenish those nutrients just to keep that space very fertile. Adding a little bit of compost or organic granular fertilizer can really help boost the nutrients in that space so that the next planting has exactly what it needs to grow. Another great space saver is going to be companion planting or interplanting. So let's say you've got a tomato growing along a trellis, and that tomato is going to take up a lot of vertical space. But what you have is the understory underneath that tomato that is free. And what you could do here is plant something like basil, which goes really well with tomatoes, or you could plant lettuce or radishes or onions or garlic. Lots and lots and lots of different options. The key to interplanting or even companion planting is you want to pick varieties that go really well together and that don't compete for space. And when we do this right, what we actually wind up with a lot of times is the ability to grow 2 plants in the same space. When it comes to tomatoes specifically, something really interesting is that the tomatoes' roots will actually go really deep down into the soil. So if you were to plant something like lettuce that has a shallow root system, those root systems are not competing with each other, and you're able to, like I said, grow both of those plants in the exact same space. Another example of this that I have in my own garden is my melon and okra bed. I have melons growing along the ground, the base of the raised bed, and then they kind of actually spill over the side. And then I have the okra taking up the vertical space. And by doing it this way, they're not competing for space, they're not competing for nutrients, and both are acting almost as a benefit to each other. As the okra grows tall throughout the season, it will provide a little bit of shade to the melons. And the melons will act as a living mulch, providing ground cover around the base of the okra plants. One of my very favorite ways to maximize my garden space is to intentionally plan my garden. And I've done entire videos on this and how we can create a garden plan and things you need to be aware of for creating that. So I will try to leave that video on the screen at the end of this video. But basically the idea here is that we want to intentionally plan our garden. We want to plan where everything is going to go so that we're utilizing every inch of our bed space. And by doing this, what we can also do is plan our succession planting. so that as we're pulling one plant out of a space, we know exactly what plant is going to go in behind it, and we already have that prepared and ready to go. And by planning our garden up front, even before we get planting, we're going to know what varieties go in what space. We're going to be able to plan based on maturity dates and growing needs. We're going to be able to reduce wasted space and avoid overcrowding. There are a lot of different software options that will help you plan your garden, but you really can just take a notebook and draw out your garden, just do a rough drawing of your garden and plan out where your varieties are going to grow and keep things in mind like maturity dates and growing needs. And I'm going to leave a link to a free vegetable planting guide that I created in the description box below. And this will help you as you start to plan out your garden. It's basically just a downloadable PDF that's going to give you some information on your most common varieties, their planting needs, and their spacing requirements. Another really important tip when it comes to growing more food in less space that's often overlooked is using containers or towers or getting really creative with your space. And I use containers every single season. And even when I had a large garden, I use containers. There are a lot of benefits to using them. I prefer grow bags, but a lot of people will use even 5-gallon buckets. I've seen people grow potatoes in cardboard boxes. There are a lot of different ways you can create growing space or supplement the growing space that you already have. I've heard a lot of people tell me that are in apartments that they have no space to grow a garden, and most of the time that's not true. If you have a balcony, or if you even have like an outside patio that you can utilize, you can throw in some containers and get a lot of food. You can use a vertical tower. They make a lot of different kinds of vertical towers. There are cheap options and they're really expensive options, but you can use vertical towers, you can use grow bags, you can use 5-gallon buckets, and there are even a lot of these do-it-yourself options for taking old pallets and turning them into growing space. The sky's the limit when it comes to creating growing space. So don't overlook those options. I've actually seen a lot of people who will use like boxes on their windowsill and grow herbs that way. That's a really great idea. If you have a south-facing, very sunny window, you can grow some kitchen herbs that way. It's probably not the greatest practice for things like tomatoes. They're not going to grow well in a sunny window. But things that have less light requirements and a very compact growth habit, you can grow those in a windowsill in your kitchen or your living room or whatever. You can utilize planters that you hang on your porch for things like dwarf tomatoes. A lot of people use these planters for pretty flower arrangements, and you can do that. But you can also grow dwarf tomatoes in those or lettuce in those. The sky's really the limit. And if we really want to get creative with utilizing our vertical space, we can go with grow towers or stackable planters, and we can grow things like strawberries or lettuce or even bush beans in the pockets of those stackable planters or grow towers. And by doing this, you can actually get a ton of food. Like I said, these are especially great for your apartment balconies or your small patios or even your small yards. So you don't need more land to grow more food. You just got to get really creative with the space you already have. To wrap things up, I want to answer a couple of the most common questions I get, especially from new gardeners. Question number one is, can I really grow enough to make it worth it in a small space? And the answer to this is absolutely yes. A couple of garden beds, like 4x8 raised beds or even in-ground beds, can grow enough for a family of 4 for most of their vegetable growing. Now, you can't grow everything in that small of a space, but if you get strategic with the types of varieties that you plant, implement the strategies we talked about here, you can grow almost enough food to feed a family of 4 in a very small space, 2, 3, 4x8 beds. But even just maybe one raised bed and a couple of containers, or even just a few containers, by utilizing the strategies we just talked about, you can really grow enough to make a huge dent in your grocery bill. Question number 2 is, how do I avoid overcrowding? The answer to this really goes back to planning. So when we talk about planning our vegetable garden, we talk about planning in the beginning of the season or before the season even starts. One of the most important things you can do is read the spacing requirements on the back of your seed packets, or utilizing a square foot gardening spacing guide, for instance. This is going to go a long way in helping you plan the amount of space that each variety is going to need. In the planting guide that I'm leaving in the description box below, I actually give you the spacing requirements based on the square foot gardening method for each of the varieties I list. So this can really help you to plan how much space you're going to need for each variety. And question number 3 is one I actually normally get asked after people come into a problem. So let's be proactive and talk about it before we even get started. And that is how to keep the soil healthy with all of this quick rotation. And the answer to that really goes back to, I kind of alluded to it earlier, is adding compost, organic granular fertilizer. There are a lot of different amendments that you can use. Most of them, to be honest with you, you probably don't need. But adding a little bit of organic matter every time you pull a plant out is going to go a long way in keeping that space very fertile. Mulch also helps. This helps with erosion or drying out of the soil. This kind of helps to protect the microbes and the biology that's kind of going on underneath the soil as well. So adding a generous layer of mulch every time you plant is going to be a really great idea. And then crop rotation. Crop rotation, while in big farm and big ag, crop rotation is a lot more important than a backyard garden. You really don't have to worry about it too much. But if you noticed disease creeping in or pest issues, or if you feel like your soil is just getting depleted, you can rotate crops and just kind of be mindful of what you're planting in each space so that you're not planting the same variety over and over and over again. By rotating a little bit, what we actually do is keep that soil, like I said, well balanced and keep it from being depleted. So tomatoes, for instance, are going to deplete a lot of calcium from your soil. They're going to deplete a lot of nutrients from your soil, but specifically calcium. So if you continuously grow tomatoes in that soil, you may wind up with a calcium deficiency. Now, again, this can be a lot less likely because you're adding amendments and compost and things like that. So it could be a good practice to plant tomatoes one year and then the next planting plant something else so that you give that soil a little bit of time to recover in between. So whether you're growing in containers, raised beds, in ground, an apartment balcony, these strategies are going to go a long way in helping you maximize your space and get a ton of food in a little bit of space. So leave me some comments down below. Let me know what you thought of the video. Let me know if there's any of these tips that you're excited to try in your own garden or any space-saving tips you found that you'd like to share with the community. I thank you guys so much for watching. I'm gonna leave some videos on your screen until the next ones come out. And I'm also gonna leave in the description box below some links to some of my favorite garden products. Now, remember that these are affiliate links, so I do earn a small commission if you purchase through them at no additional cost to you. But they go a long way in supporting the channel. May your garden be full of grace, may it be abundantly blessed. We'll see you next time. Bye.